Okay, so in this lesson, we are going to take what we know about quadrilaterals and we're going to start to talk about area. So your goal for this lesson is I can determine the area of rectangles, parallelograms, and squares. Now you might notice that there's one type of quadrilateral that we talked about that's missing from this list, and that is trapezoids. As we start to talk about area, we're going to talk about formulas. And the formulas for a rectangle, a parallelogram, and a square, they're all very similar to each other. So we're going to deal with those in this lesson, and then we're going to do a lesson on the area of trapezoids separately because the formula is so different. Okay, so let's talk about some basic vocabulary before we move on. So the area is the amount of space in a 2D shape. So last time we talked about a 2D shape, and we talked about that it is a flat shape. It does not rise up, it does not have any height, it is completely flat. It's something that you would draw, for example. Okay, and so the area is all of this space inside the 2D shape. Okay, and there's a way to calculate that. Then we have base. So a base is any side of a quadrilateral. So it could rest on this side, this is a side, this is a side, or this is a side. So base is any side of it. Then we have something called the altitude. And altitude is just a fancy word for height, but in word problems especially, you'll see the word altitude used, so it's important to know that it means height, okay? And height is simply the distance from one side to the other. So how tall is the quadrilateral? That's another way to look at it. And then we have compound figure. Now we will be working with compound figures, but not for a couple weeks, but it's important to know what it is. And so compound figure is two or more shapes put together. So you'll see here I have a triangle and I have a square, and they're put together. And I'm going to show you how to find the area of those compound figures in just a couple weeks. Okay, so you have your area formula sheet, and we're going to be filling this out over the course of our unit. And so here I have what you need to fill it out with, because we're going to be talking about rectangles, parallelograms, squares, next lesson trapezoids. And so you're going to want to copy this down exactly word for word. And it's very important that your area sheet is very clear because you're going to constantly be referencing it throughout the unit. Okay, I'm going to go through this quickly, but I need you to pause the video so that you can draw and write arrows and make it very clear on your paper. But basically, the area of a triangle is base times height. So this is the base, this is the height, or you can think about it as length times width. Okay, so over here in our example, the height right here is 4, and the base is 7. And so if area equals length times width, then area equals, so our length, our base is 7, and our width, which is our height, is 4. So the area of this shape is 7 times 4, which is 28. So the area is going to be 28. Now we're going to talk about units as this goes on, but units are very important. So the height is not just 4, it is 4 inches. And the base is not just 7, it is 7 inches. And the area, now this is interesting. So remember back to our expressions unit, when you had A times A, that would give you A squared. Here we have inches times inches. So the area is 28 inches squared, okay? All right, here we have a parallelogram, and make sure you pause the video to draw it. Now, again, this formula should look very similar. So area equals length times width, or base times height. We'll use base times height in this case, okay? So area equals, what is the base? The base is 9. And it's 9 centimeters, times the height. Now notice that it has a perfectly vertical line drawn to show the height here. This slanted line is not the height, okay? It is not the height. because it's slanted. And so you always want to make sure that you have the correct dimension for your height. So the height in this case is 5 centimeters. So this is going to be 5 cm. And when we multiply them together, 9 times 5 is 45. And centimeters times centimeters is centimeters squared. And let me write this in here, 5 cm, 9 cm, and 45 cm squared. Okay, now we have the area of a square. Again, you can use the formula area equals base times height, but you can also use area equals side squared, or side to the second power, which means side times side, which if you think about it, basically equals base times height. Okay, so it's the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and use area equals base times height. So here it tells us that the height is 8. But what do we know about a square from our quadrilaterals lesson? Well, from that lesson, we know that all the sides of a square are the exact same thing. So if this is 8, then this is also 8, and this is also 8, and this is also 8. Okay, so that's very important. So when I do my formula, it is 8 equals, our base is 8 yards, and our height is also 8 yards. So our area equals, 8 times 8 is 64. Yards times yards is yards to the second power. And that's my dog in the background. So the height is 8 yards. The base is 8 yards. And the area is 64 yards squared. That's still my dog whining, if you hear her. Okay, so let's work our way right into examples. All right, so here we have a square, and we know it's a square because we have these right angles that we talked about here, and all 4 sides are congruent, meaning that they're equal. So I know here that my height is 13 meters, and then I also know that since it's a square, my base is also 13 meters. Now to find the area, it's area equals base times height. So it's area equals 13 times 13. And if you use your calculator, you should get that 13 times 13 is going to give you 169. And so here we have 169, and meters times meters is meters squared. Okay, let's move on to example 2. So here we have a rectangle, and we know it's a rectangle because this side looks equal to this side, and this side here looks congruent to this side. But that would tell us it's just a parallelogram. The other thing that I notice is that these are right angles. They appear to be because they're perfectly straight angles. So here our height is 21.7 kilometers, and our base is 15 kilometers. Now to find the area of a square, it's area equals base times height. And in this case, it means area equals 21.7, let me try that again. Area equals base times height. Okay, it means area equals 15 times 21.7. And when you calculate that, you should get 325.5. Now, kilometers times kilometers is going to be kilometers squared, or kilometers to the second power. Okay, let's look at this guy here. So here we have a parallelogram. We know that because this side is congruent to this side and it's parallel. They'll never intersect. And then this side is also congruent to this side. So our height is 1.6 inches. And then our base, and remember the base can be, it doesn't have to be the bottom. It's any side. The base is 2.5 inches. And again, our area is base times height. So your area is going to be 2.5 times 1.6. And when you calculate that, you're going to get 4. So your area is 4, but always your units, inches times inches is inches squared, or inches to the second power. Okay, here you have a couple that you need to try. What I'm going to do, since I have them on different slides, is I'm going to go ahead and put the answer up, but if you're not ready, I'll warn you before and you can pause the video. Okay, so go ahead and pause if you're not done yet. The answer to the first one is going to be 289 meters squared. Because this is a square, all the sides are 17, and it is base times height. Go ahead and move on to the next one. Okay, pause the video if you're not ready for this answer yet. This one is 286 kilometers squared. Again, you have a rectangle here, and so its area equals base times height. So when you multiply 26 by 11, you should get 286 kilometers times kilometers is kilometers squared. All right, go ahead and try this one. All right, go ahead and pause the video if you're not ready for this one. For this parallelogram here, we have 377 inches squared. The reason why is we have the base, which is 29, times the height, which is 13, and inches times inches are inches squared. Okay, now we're going to move into some word problems. So if the area of a square, and I drew a picture here for you, is 36 inches squared, what is the length of each side? So what we've done now is flip the formula around. So usually we find the area, because we know that area equals base times height, or with a square, area equals side to the second power. But this time it's giving us the area. So let's look at this formula. It's the same exact thing, side times side, okay? So the area is 36 equals side squared. What two numbers multiplied together, because that's what this would be to the second power, would give you 36? 5 times 5 is 25, 7 times 7 is 49, 6 times 6 is 36. So the length of each side is 6 inches. And the reason why it's not squared is because we're not looking for the area, we're looking for just the length of one side. Okay, let's look at a different example. If the area of a square is 81 meters squared, what is the length of each side? Again, area equals base times height, or area equals side squared. And again, this is just for a square. Now, if the total area is 81 meters squared, what two numbers, the same number, what one number multiplied times itself would give you 81? Well, 7 times 7 is 49, 8 times 8 is 64, 9 times 9 is 81. So it would be 9 meters. And what this means is this is 9 meters, and this is 9 meters, this is 9 meters, and this is 9 meters. Okay, another one. If the area of a square is 144 feet squared, what is the length of each side? And this right here should actually say 144 feet squared. I made a mistake there, okay? So again, area equals base times height, or you can use area equals side squared. They're giving us the area, so 144 equals what number multiplied times itself would give you 144? And as these numbers get bigger, use your calculator for guess and check. Do 9 times 9, 10 times 10, 11 times 11. In this case, you should get that 12 times 12 is 144. So each side is going to equal 12 feet. Okay, Now, if a rectangle has a length of 9 inches and an area of 45 inches squared, what is the width? Okay, now these are just a little bit trickier. So that the formula for an area of a rectangle is area equals base times height, okay? What we need to do is take these numbers and fill in what we have. So do we have the area? Yes, it's 45. Do we have the base? Okay, and in this case, the base is going to be the length. Yes, we do. It's 9. Do we have the height? No. So this says 45 equals 9h. This should look just like a one-step problem to you. Put a box around the variable, divide both sides by 9, these 9's cancel, and your h should equal 45 divided by 9 is 5. Oh, and as I'm looking at my picture here, this should say 9, not 90. Sorry. So your height, which is the same thing as your width, okay, in a 2D figure, is going to be 5. All right, now we have a parallelogram here. What is the height of the parallelogram if the area is 32 meters squared and the base is 8 meters? So again, area equals base times height, okay? So we have our area is 32, our base is 8, and we don't know our height. So let's solve it like a one-step equation. Box the variable, divide both sides by 8. These 8's will cancel, and you're left with h equals 32 divided by 8 is 4. But when you write your answer, you want to make sure that you have your units. 4 meters. And the way you can check yourself is 4 meters times 8 meters is 32 meters squared. Okay, you try both of these and then we will reconnect for the answer. Also, it can be helpful to draw a picture. All right, so for the first one, I drew a picture of a parallelogram just to help me. You should have gotten 30 feet squared. And for the second one, when you multiplied base times height, 12 times 15, you should have gotten 180 feet squared. Okay, try these two. Again, draw a picture if it's helpful. Okay, so for the first one, and pause the video if you're not done yet, you should have gotten that the area was 196 inches squared, and that's because each side is 14, and 14 times 14 is 196. And for the second one, you were trying to find the base or the length of the rectangle, and you should have gotten that it was 15 yards, because 60 divided by 4 is going to give you 15. Okay, now I want you to try this one, and we're going to bring the perimeter back. And remember that the perimeter is adding all the sides together. Okay, so if the area of a square, so I have a square here, if the area is 256 meters squared, what is the length of each side? And remember, we talked about kind of guessing and checking. Put some numbers into your calculator and see if they work. Now, pause the video if you're not done with part A. Okay, the answer to part A is going to be that 16 is the length of each side, because 16 times 16 is 256. So your answer here is 16 meters. Now, using part B, what is the perimeter of that square? Remember, perimeter is adding all the sides together. So what is 16 plus 16 plus 16 plus 16? Or you can just do 16 times 4. And your answer to that should be 64 meters. Now, the reason why it is not meters squared is because we're not multiplying. We are simply adding them all together. All right, that is the end of this lesson. It was a lot of information, but we're going to have lots of time to practice. Make sure you rewind or pause if you need to, and always ask me questions in class.